This is Steve Carlson. I'm a nominee for the United States Senate running against Al Franken. And today I'd like to talk to you about family values, about the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, and about Adrian Peterson. Now, football is generally viewed as entertainment by the media and politicians. Owners and commissioners like to sell a lot of tickets and avoid controversy that hurts profits. But football is a serious activity, and players get seriously hurt, often resulting in lifelong injuries. Not only that, when they leave the field of play, they are real human beings. They are not worshipped as so many complain. Even though seizing and holding territory on the field looks meaningless, it's really acting out combat, and the Army-Navy games were the first great college competition. It teaches character and discipline. But recently, due to the hypocrisy of politicians seeking re-election, Al Franken and Mark Dayton, and a lot of people who disrespect athletes, many in the media began to lump in disciplining children with beating up women. The target of this personal attack is Adrian Peterson, and these politicians have created an atmosphere in which he may never again get to play in the NFL. I personally hope he continues to do what he thinks is right. And if we're going to get into his personal and family life, I think we should ignore hypocritical politicians and look through a lens of family values. Professional athletes, while tickets are sold because of the excitement of the competition, the ritual of combat and courage, are not the property of the team owners or politicians. Mark Dayton and Al Franken treat Peterson and his family as chattel, as personal property, instead of free and responsible family members. The evidence shows very clearly that Peterson and his family are reasonable and responsible people. This detracts from the sport, which is the purpose of football, and it demeans those who play it. Each of us need to consider our own family values, not glibly pile on players who are really trying to do what is right. They should have the freedom to do what is right in their family. But Al Franken doesn't see it this way. He is embarrassed, and he puts his own desire to look good, to look like a leader, over the rights and duties of Peterson as a parent. And where actual violence against women is occurring along with other violent and irresponsible behavior, he is willing to blur the lines to throw in this disciplinary episode with the Peterson child with unrestrained violence against persons. Family values do not lump in disciplining children with beating women. The distinction is critical, and we harm others if we pretend that these players are a two-dimensional cardboard figure who just comes alive on Sunday for our amusement and delight, or consumption of huge amounts of alcohol where real violence and damage can occur. Let's look at what happened before Franken and Dayton intervened to ruin the lives of many and to do further damage to Minnesota's efforts to be competitive and further the values of clean competition and character, which are the real meaning behind football. First of all, let's be clear that it is considered appropriate in all 50 states to discipline a child who has done something wrong and needs to be corrected. This is because the leadership of parents is absolutely critical to raising up a child. The parent has experienced, has undertaken the responsibilities of adult life, and needs to protect the child from the consequences of not obeying what is right and just, and then to lead that child to the kind of opportunities in life that are available if you play it straight. As Peterson texted to a family member, quote, "But all my kids will know, hey, daddy has the biggie heart, but don't play no games when it comes to acting right," unquote. This incident happened in Texas. Texas law does not prohibit the use of a switch, a long-standing tradition there to administer physical discomfort to get a child's attention and obedience where appropriate. Nobody questioned that Mr. Peterson's disciplining his son was appropriate, and yet fathers all over the NFL and beyond are undercut by this cynical condemnation of his action. The Texas official who sought this action admits that, quote, obviously parents are entitled to discipline their children as they see fit, unquote. But the official, Phil Grant, asserts that all such action is limited by, quote, what the community would say is reasonable, unquote. And in Texas, the Attorney General's office provides this online guideline for what it will allow its parents to do before the state steps in to discipline the parent and assert control over the child. Quote, a blow that causes a red mark that fades in an hour is not likely to be judged abusive. On the other hand, a blow that leaves a bruise, welt, or swelling, or requires medical attention probably would be judged abusive, unquote. Now again, this doctor's appointment was scheduled before the boy returned from Texas, and it was not set up because he required medical attention. So Texas says a blow can be administered. That wouldn't be judged abusive. I personally would not like to see Mr. Peterson striking a small child with his hand. Would you? Attempting to cause a red mark that fades in an hour? This kind of prescription for a family right is obviously arbitrary. You can't say there is an intent to abuse, child abuse, because this narrow prescription is not strictly followed by a parent. Using an instrument like a thin switch off a tree or even a belt substitutes a neutral device not intended to do bodily harm, instead of striking the child with your hand, which can be perceived as assault and abuse. This part of the country used to hold others as chattel, as property, subject to whippings and beatings according to the preferences of the so-called owners and masters. Today, these people have their freedom from that arrangement, and yet now the state turns the tables on these free people, and the state intervenes to prevent contact with those children and limit any acceptable action, even loving discipline of your own children, to this blow that leaves a red mark that disappears in an hour. And this is just a guideline, leaving it to the discretion of a grand jury in this very sensitive and controversial issue to take punitive action against parents who are only intending to exercise their God-given right to care for their children. Now, you might not agree with this use of a small tree branch, and I might not, but that's not in the law, and it probably shouldn't be, this ban on tree branches, because it misses the important point that the intent is not to inflict bodily harm, but to discipline and command obedience to do what is right, in the judgment and discretion of the parent. And I am asking the politicians to step aside and honor that inherent parental right in this case. Don't compare it to assault. The NFL has a collective bargaining agreement to the extent disciplining your child is seen as conduct detrimental to the team or league. I don't think it is detrimental. I think it's Peterson's business, and he relies not only on the ideas and guidance of his mother, but the involvement of the boy's mother, who had scheduled a doctor's appointment before the boy visited Peterson in Texas and did not report this as abuse. But because the switch, unfortunately, did reach further than Peterson intended, it did leave some scratches that required medical attention. There is nothing here except a family practice of caring for and leading children through perfectly appropriate means. But even if the NFL somehow finds this is actually detrimental to the league and not just a convenient target for politicians seeking re-election, the terms of the collective bargaining agreement, suspension for up to 4 games and withholding pay for another, should have been followed. Instead, because of Franken's intervention, the players have made another arrangement, which is suspension with pay until this matter is settled, if it ever is settled. And it's a violation by Al Franken, abusing his position to further his own ambitions by injuring others, to disregard the rights under the contract of a player, just because he is a very successful and public figure, like Adrian Peterson. And most disturbing of all, because Al can never admit he made a mistake, this man's career may be totally ruined. This is a serious, serious violation of trust by a politician seeking to further his own re-election. I have also made the point about my opponent Al Franken that he clearly does not believe in respecting the safety and security of children. Many of us now know that in addition to the moral issues surrounding abortion generally, that after 20 weeks, when you were in the womb, you were able to feel pain. If you were yanked out of the womb, had a limb severed in an operation or a bone broken, you would have felt that. And so many of us have sought to regulate this barbaric practice, but not Al Franken. He is not only on record against stopping this cruelty and barbarism, but actively supporting Planned Parenthood, who supports this barbarism, in a rally against any such protections of children. And yet, when Adrian Peterson takes a responsible and right action to lead and discipline his child, not Al's child or Mark Dayton's, Al attacks Adrian and threatens the entire Viking franchise again. That is the message of this photo. Meet Senator Minnesota Nice. Al is pretending he is Mr. Nice, but he is really amoral and reckless. And if you keep him in Congress, he'll be all show business. You never know which Al will show up. Al, the compassionate protector of children against their parents, even when the child is doing wrong, or Al, the carefree sacker and destroyer of innocent unborn children. These are serious matters. Al and Mark may think they're looking good by jumping in and making decisions about the rights and responsibilities of Adrian Peterson and parents everywhere who have the inherent right to raise and instruct their children. But things don't look good for Minnesota when politicians intervene in the lives of others to further their own careers and to recklessly put at risk our family rights. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm running for the U.S. Senate, and I approve this message.